Okay, let's talk about how specializing in one exercise can lead to more muscle gain. My unique situation, injuries, muscle imbalances, issues, not being able to train, led me into specializing not necessarily by choice. But through this experience, I've seen the benefits and the potential drawbacks of doing one specific exercise. For example, triceps. The French press or dumbbell tricep extension is the only tricep exercise I've done for over 3 years and put substantial size onto my arms and the rest of my upper body, just doing that one movement. Biceps, just standing curls, variations of standing curls. Obviously you can do, dumbbells versus barbells, hammer curls versus palms facing up, cable curls, etc. But at the end of the day, the movement's pretty similar. You're just changing your wrist positioning. But ultimately, any curling movement I've done, I would say basically you're doing one exercise for biceps with changing wrist positions. And the benefit, in particular, I'm going to focus on talking about the triceps exercise because I think in particular it highlights what the benefits are and how it can actually lead to more muscle gain. The first thing is it makes it much easier to track your progress. So if you do one movement for each individual muscle group, let's say maybe it's squats for legs, maybe it's incline dumbbell press for chest, maybe it's seated row, cable row for back. If you do that same movement every time you go to train that body part, it's going to be much easier for you to track your progress from one workout to the next, which is a really critical component of building muscle in that you find a way to progress the weight and reps over time. And that should be a staple of your routine, where I recommend using an extended rest time, tracking the weight and reps that you can get in the 8 to 15 rep range, and going in there each time attacking, trying to do one more rep than you did the last time. I think that should be part of your program, and it's much easier to do if you stick with one movement. Second thing, your technique and execution can get to an elite level where you unlock additional benefits in the movement that you otherwise wouldn't if you were consistently changing the exercises you're doing. For example, the dumbbell tricep extension for myself, I've found that focusing on scooping my elbows in, pointing them in front of me, dropping my shoulders down, and then letting them drift back some puts way more direct emphasis on the triceps. That's how it feels. And it also helps to activate your pecs, your lats, and your delts some. And I've seen growth in the rest of my upper body from using those cues. But that technique I didn't develop initially. It took time from repeatedly doing the movement. And then eventually it started to kick in. I went, wow, this is a whole nother level of execution where I can really lock the movement in and further ingrain the mind-muscle connection between my triceps and my brain when I'm executing the movement. And if you're, not that you couldn't do that with high exercise variety, but I think it enhances your ability to do that if you specialize with one movement. And then lastly, it allows you to maintain better form as you push to high intensities, i.e. failure. The more familiar you are with the movement, the more you're able to maintain quality form and keep the majority of the tension on the working muscle, in this case the triceps, as you approach failure, which I think is really important. If you don't have excellent form, or let's just say generally good form, as you approach failure, you're going to run into problems. For example, with the triceps, dumbbell tricep extension, what happens as you approach failure is that the elbows start to flare out and also your shoulders start to shrug up some. And I've noticed both these things to de-emphasize the amount of resistance or tension on the triceps, because as that working muscle, in this case the triceps, gets close to failing and that it doesn't have any energy or force to exert, your body inevitably, and you're telling yourself to still complete the movement, your body inevitably is going to try to find ways to make the movement easier and bring other muscles into it. A classic example that is very easy for any of us to understand is standing curls with a barbell. You can do them really strict in the beginning, but then as you approach failure, you might arch your back, you might let your elbows flare out, you might shrug your shoulders up. All these things are bringing other muscles online, taking some of the tension or force off of the biceps so that you can still complete a rep. And it has its place, I think, towards the end of a set to let your form maybe slip a little bit so that you can get an extra rep or two. But if you don't have that establishment of proper high level form with the movement. As you approach failure, it's going to be harder for you to keep the majority of the resistance on the working muscle, which is ultimately what you want. As you approach failure, you don't want your form to just break down. As you get closer to fatigue, you want your form to stay relatively solid and just have the level of fatigue be as high as possible on the muscle. And if you don't develop a consistent routine or a consistent pattern with individual movements, it can be harder to do that and execute that at a really high level. All of that being said, I think there's some downsides to doing just the same movement over and over and over again. I think that there is some variety in the way that the muscle gets hit. For example, the triceps, if you mixed in close grip press or dips, the movement feels completely different. It's probably hitting the lateral head a bit more than the long head, although that's mostly overstated. I think that's a very small point. I think other things to consider is boredom and variety. I think for a lot of people, if you have to go in there and do the exact same movement every single time, you might get bored and lose motivation. For me, it's not the case. I think what's boring is not making gains. That's more boring. I'll do whatever. If I can get a good workout and get a sick pump and make gains, that's better than anything else. I'll trade in everything for that. But for a lot of people, I think it's going to be more difficult to stick with it, and you will potentially lose motivation and have a difficult time staying dedicated to it. For most exercises from a muscle building standpoint, I don't think you need a million different movements. But from a functional performance, human body, human movement standpoint, there's a much stronger argument that particularly like a compound movement, let's say for your back, there's an argument that you might want to not just do lat pull down all the time. You might want to do some single arm stuff where you're involving a little bit of rotation of your torso. It mimics the natural movement of your body a little bit more. Your body isn't necessarily designed to just be in a fixed position or vertically pulling weight down. You might want to be doing a standing bent over row, because that mimics a little bit more of the function of the body, where your posterior chain, your hamstrings, your glutes, your lower back, your whole back is being activated as you're rowing and activating your scapula and the muscles that move your scapula. It's a lot more functional. From a functional human performance standpoint, there's a much stronger argument that specializing in one movement is not ideal. So it depends on your goal. But I hope that through this you can see, and through my unique example, that if you're training for muscle gain, the benefits of specializing in one movement for muscle, I think, outweigh the cons. And what I would recommend for the typical person is that you start your session with the same movement for 3 months at a time. So on your chest day or on your push day, pick a movement. They're all similar, the compound pressing movements. Pick one, let's say incline dumbbell press. And every chest day, you're going to start with that movement. And you're going to track the weight, and you're going to work to progress it and develop your form, your mind-muscle connection, and level that up to like an elite level. And I think you're going to get a lot of benefit. And then for the rest of the workout, you can mix it up. So you're getting the best of both worlds, especially if you need some variety and your motivation is potentially going to decrease if you have to do the same thing over and over again. You just start with that same movement for 3 months. You stick with it and you say, I'm just going to become a specialist in the dumbbell incline press. And I'm going to try to elevate that lift weight-wise, mind-muscle connection-wise, to as high of a level as I can. And after I complete that, I do my 3 to 5 working sets or whatever. I move on and I mix it up and I do some flies, cable flies. I do some decline barbell press. I do some single arm flies, whatever. So that way you're still getting that variety, but you're getting the benefit of specializing. And then I think it also highlights what the real process of training for muscle gain looks like. And I think a lot of times people substitute that away by reaching for variety. And at the end of the day, training for muscle gain is just about dedication, intensity, and repetition, and some form of progression. And that's the reality of it. And you might say, doing the same movement over and over again is boring or dull, but that's a more accurate representation of what the process actually looks like. And I think a lot of times people are tempted to reach for all these fancy different routines and changing things up, and you're avoiding kind of accepting the degree of dedication that you need by thinking it's some, fancy new workout that's a person on Instagram posted that shows all these new variations and techniques you need to do to isolate your lats better. It's probably not where the actual value is. It doesn't hurt. You want to try different movements, go ahead. But for the most part, the consistency and the repetition is what's actually going to lead to more muscle gain than any one specific exercise variation or technique twist. And so that's how I would recommend people structure it based on my own personal experience. If I could train my whole body properly, that's what I would do. I would start each day with the same movement for at least a couple months. And then if you get tired of it, you can switch it up to a new one and start to progress that movement. But at least you give yourself the opportunity to over an extended period of time, I recommend at least a couple months, to progress that one movement and get the benefits of being a specialist. But you can still have the variety by then the rest of your workout, you mix and match different movements around and you can change them. So you have some structure and some chaos, which I think is the marrying of those two concepts, I think actually leads you to the best results. Yeah, that's it. If you want, as always, to do my exact arm routines, I document and upload all of them onto my website as well as on my Only Arms. Every single workout I'm doing gets uploaded there. So if you want to follow along and do the exact routines that I'm doing that you're seeing in the background of these videos, you can sign up there. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps you to make more gains. If nothing else, maybe some thought-provoking discussion for you to consider and ponder yourself to lead to more muscle gain yourself within your freaking routine. I don't know what I'm saying. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Peace.